Sorry, can you hear me? Excellent. So apparently the presentation is broken, so I'll just wing it. Awesome. No, it's the presentation, the PowerPoint that's broken. Okay. Fun times. All right, so we'll go with this. Hi, everybody. My name is Guillaume Charest. I work for Ashley Cassavan in Treasury Board. So I will be providing you with an update on our directions for the rules. Essentially, Melanie spoke well about the people dimension, the risks, all the challenges that we have to face. From our perspective, our role is to provide guidance and leadership on various of policies instruments, more specifically about open standards, open source software for ourselves here. I wanted to go over a little quick landscape. The countries around the world have already started adopting different guidelines, laws around open source use, contribution, and creation. We have been working on that recently. So if you look at within Canada, we have the Ville de Montréal that has provided already their policy on use of open source software and adoption, and actually hardware as well. But more specifically around the Office of the Chief Information Officer, what we have been working on is with the OpenGov team for open government, open data, open information, the Open Government Portal. The enterprise architecture where we work are really focused on specific outcomes. The white paper was one of them. We had great feedback from the community, more feedback this morning to learn from. That's awesome. That's the way we worked this out there from the scratch. Everybody could help us, and that's what we want to continue doing. Melanie mentioned the Open Source Advisory Board. This is a group that is consisted of government department executives and private companies as well. So we have people from both sides of the fence working together, trying to provide guidance to the government of Canada. We provide recommendations to the Enterprise Review Board, which have representative of all departments. So quick history, open source is not new in government Canada. As we witnessed this morning with Kirsten's presentation, we have contributed a lot to open source software. We may just need a bit more guidance, a bit more framework to help departments be more comfortable with using, contributing, and creating open source software. And that's what we're working towards with. So the history that you see here is a bit small, but it's prior to 2002 Gosling Initiative. We had the geospatial and scientific communities that have been working on this for a long time. And Arcan has been leading the way in the use of free and open source software. They had already have their committees inside their organization, and we're learning a lot from them. We're not starting from scratch. We're taking what's already out there in the departments to make sure that we're aligned. So a few definitions of what is open standard, source code, nothing new there. We're running a bit short on time, so I'm going to go quite fast. Examples of use of open source software in the government right now, we have the open and accessible digital workspace. This is where all Government of Canada employees can share, work together, collaborate on your projects. There are communities of practices. This is all built off of open source software. We now have the GC Collab as well, so anybody interested in joining, this is an opportunity for people that are not in the government to work with us. If you're another public administration or employee, so cities, provinces, you can all join. If you're a university student or a researcher, you can also join. And anybody else can also ping one of us and ask for an invite. The OpenGov portal, like Melanie was mentioning earlier, is built off open source software. We're using CCAN. Ashley had a lot of work in this initiative as well. We are using Drupal and Solr. Contributions to open source software. Essentially, we, the Government of Canada, have been contributing and working on the Web Experience Toolkit. It's one of those examples that, again, we are contributing to open source communities. We are allowed to do so. We just need some additional guidelines. And recently as well, we have the Communications Security Establishment, CSE, for anybody that is familiar with this organization. It's very secret. It usually is working in the shadows. However, they actually release open source software. So that gives an idea that we can do this. There are ways to do so in a sound manner that doesn't compromise the national security. The Canadian Digital Service is also working fully in the open. All their projects are available for all to see. They can see the development. They can see what's the end result of it. You can collaborate. This is happening right now. So, an update on what we're doing at Treasury Board. We have finalized the first version of the Open First white paper, which is setting the table from our perspective on what is open standards, what is open source software, the open culture dimension, the open markets dimensions as well. So we're trying to set down what we understand, where we're going to go from there, and we're going to be working on the next steps, which are open resource exchange. We want to encourage every single departments working with open source software to let us know so that we can see areas of expertise across departments. We have a very decentralized organization. If you look at the Government of Canada, each department has its own way of managing its IT. We are providing guidance at the Treasury Board level, but what we want is break down those silos and reuse what we've already done. I've seen in my years in the government really, really interesting software developed internally. Unfortunately, I had some interesting managers at some point saying, yeah, that's my budget. I won't share that with this other department. That's not really the way we want to go. It's our collective efforts that makes these solutions so great. So let's share and reuse. The Open Resource Exchange has the other dimension as well. So we want to know what open source software you're using, but also what you're releasing out there. So if you have a public repository, whether it's on GitHub, GitLab, whatever the platform, we just want to know where it is so that we can bring it all together. We may find duplicates somewhere, or areas of expertise in collaboration as well. We have the GitHub organization, so if you are a department and are interested to start open sourcing your projects, we're there to help you. Please join us. If you have your own repositories and another platform, please do just contact us. We will provide guidance if required. The Open Source Advisory Board, we have been meeting for almost a year now, close to that. There's been a lot of great presentations from different private companies about best practices, tools that are enabling these different departments to work better. And we also do recommendations for the Enterprise Architecture Review Board. Some of them have already been pushed to the Digital Standard Architecture. So we will be using these groups, these expertise from different perspectives to continue recommend direction for the Government of Canada. What's upcoming? This afternoon we will be looking at one of the other deliverables that we're working on, the requirements for use, contribution, and creation of open source software. There's going to be a session about policy jam, source code, what we need to think of. There's a lot of great material out there already. We just need to also take the flavor for a Government of Canada perspective. So we want to see what works, what doesn't work. Calvin, that's speaking next, going to be explaining what he lived as an actual employee within one of the departments that have their own policies, their own structure and processes. In the next 6 months, we want to align with partners like ESDC, Statistics Canada, that has showcased that they can contribute in open source communities, and Natural Resource Canada as well. All the departments that are already working on this or want to work on the Open First initiative, we want to work with you because we don't want to provide a direction. We want to work with you all so that we get the direction in line. So Open Resource Exchange, you have a project, you're using open source software, we want to know about it because we want to showcase that. And we are reviewing policy instruments with legal services as well. So there's a lot of dimensions, intellectual property. Anything that we want to add there?
We'll share more information soon
Yep.
Related to intellectual property. There's been lots of questions that we've received, so we'll want to leave a couple minutes for questions.
Yep.
So just really quickly, I think a couple things to highlight from this are that, one, we're here to help. So we're creating central leadership with the, so GitHub is, there's a Canada repo on there, and it's really just been everybody putting their own stuff up, and there hasn't been any sort of central leadership around it. So now Guillaume's your point of contact if you do have questions, and also that gives us a better sense of what projects are happening. Within that, we've set up this beta open resource exchange, thanks to Sebastien and Guillaume. Sebastien's not in here. We do want to connect that ultimately to the Open Government Portal. So we do have a way to demonstrate the code that Canada's actually sharing. So you saw the presentation earlier by Kirsten. The US has code.gov. We're going to incorporate all of those pieces together. One of the things you didn't see on the earlier slide was that there was a Venn diagram on the open and how all these pieces fit together. You heard Melanie's talk earlier. What we're really trying to, and I spoke to it in opening remarks, is that we're just trying to define how all of these pieces work and what tools we can use and not create too many spaces that people need to go to access information. So that's the type of, when we say central leadership around open, that's the type of stuff that we're doing, creating a one-stop shop around that, recognizing though that there is individual expertise required in any sort of specific domain. And so from that, the Open Source Advisory Board is actually broken down into additional working groups. So those are rules, tools, and people. And what we do is we have presentations once a month. The board happens once a month, but there's presentations focusing on one of those components every single month. So you're going to see a presentation later. Mike Hardy from Red Hat is here, and he's going to talk about the people component and the culture, because that's a huge topic that we deal with almost every single month. And so we'll just talk about ways to make that transition happen. So all that to say is that what we're doing really from Treasury Board's perspective is not only defining the types of rules that are required and what do we need to put in so that you guys can do your jobs, but then also how do you gain access and get access to knowledge. Where we have it, we're happy to share that with you. Where you guys, we can just also be the facilitation or connection point between you guys as well. I think by virtue of how many people are here and jammed into this room, obviously there's a lot more of a community that we weren't necessarily aware of. I do, though, want to say a huge thank you to Agora. There's a lot of members of Agora here as well. I know you guys have been doing this really informally. We're really just picking up on your coattails and making this more of a formal process. So that's really what we wanted to get across today. One of those key pieces, though, is definitely licensing. That's been open for a long time, an open issue for a long time. So we've recently got a legal review on that from the Intellectual Property Office, and so we'll be providing updates through that, through the Open Source Advisory Board. One of the things that I would mention is even though we have members for the Open Source Advisory Board, it is open to everyone, so you can subscribe to the GitHub page, and then you can follow when we have those meetings. They are the third
Wednesday of every month.
We have so many boards right now. We're doing central leadership on everything. But yes, so that would be the thing to do. Yeah.
Does anybody have questions? We will take a few minutes for questions. Yep.
I have a comment. Hi, my name is Annette Hester, and I work on data innovation, data visualization. I just had a comment in general, and I wasn't here through the whole session, so apologies if it was raised. But I was struck this morning on all the conversations that we had. The word design didn't come in once. And in a world of excessive information, unless you think about how people receive information, and that the web is a visual space, if you are not considering creating visual spaces that invite exploration, that bring some calmness, that make people receive as opposed to emit or shut out. It's not going to happen. And in order to do that, we need designers. So please, please, please remember that and include in this conversation from the get-go designers. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's a great comment. One of the things that within the work we're doing, we're talking about domain-specific communities of practice, and we think of open source as being a technology only, but I think that's a good point, is that there's policy in the open, there's designers in the open, and so we've thought about those things conceptually.
So these session is really more high level. If you go into the people stream, those other sessions, there might be a bit more points around designing solutions. Right now there was a workshop in the Foundry around the experience of crowdsourcing information, but also how you interact with these people, how you can foster the participation of citizens.
Other questions?
Good?
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.